The cluster set is one of those things where when you get into it, and we'll break this down here in a minute, you're going to be super intentional for the time that you're there, and it's going to help you break through those plateaus for several different reasons. So let's talk about what the cluster set is and kind of what it looks like. So I think it's important to kind of differentiate. You may hear the term, people might have heard the term like intersets versus intrasets. You want to crush that volume. Somebody just turned up the radio or the stereo in the gym. I don't know if you guys are hearing that in the background. If so, I apologize. But basically, cluster sets are like smaller groups of reps broken up with one larger set, right? So you've got a set, whatever that is. Let's go back to the number 8 because that's an easy one. So we're going to do our set of 8, but instead of doing all 8 in a row, we're doing 2, then we're taking a pause, then we're doing 2, then we're taking a pause, then we're doing 2 again. That pause time is important, right? So it's a very short pause time. When I say that, it's going to be much shorter than what you'd be taking in between like that 3x8, right? A straight set, and then from between the first, the second, and the third set, where you may be resting 90 seconds to 2 minutes, depending on the intensities that you're working at. These are short rest times that happen in between those pairs, as an example. And so what you can do there is, again, with your traditional set of 8, you may be working somewhere, let's say between 80 and 80 or 75 and 80% of your 1 rep max. That's what you can do 8 reps for and get at or near failure with, right? Well, what this does is this allows you then to increase loads, right? So you may be able to work more towards your 80 to 85 or even higher, 90, depending on what you're doing and what your strength levels are like, for those 2 reps. Then you take a pause, right? And what's the benefit of the pause? And we'll talk about specifically how that pause should look, but that pause allows your system to regenerate just a bit, right? And specifically when we're talking about muscle building, strength building, and power building, we're talking about the energy system, the phosphocreatine system. So, everybody's taking that creatine out there for the cognitive and the muscle building benefits and whatever else. It's that basically substance in the ATP reproduction that's happening inside the cells that gives you the energy to then do the next set if you're doing that straight set. That's why we rest 90 seconds to 2 minutes. We kind of are going to regenerate that about as much as we can as we're nearing that fitness to fatigue model throughout the course of our workout. Well, in this case, if we take a little pause in between rep number 2 and rep numbers 3 and 4, and then again between rep numbers 5 and 6, and then even 7 and 8, we're giving a little bit of time for that system to regen. And by having a little bit more energy in the system, a little bit more of that phosphocreatine that, again, regenerates that ATP for us, it gives us a little bit more of a boost. So we should be able to push, pull, squat, lunge, deadlift, whatever, snatch, whatever it is that we're doing, should give us a little bit more gas in the tank in order to be able to hit a slightly heavier load.
Yeah, and that energy system, it's very expensive as a way to think about it, and you run through it quickly. So allowing just that quick reloading phase, and the reason you take things like creatine is it kind of builds up that pool a little bit more, right? So it gives you more of that quick energy to implement into this lifting. So when you're doing a set of 8 normally, you're going to fatigue through that. But if you kind of get this quick little reload in between, and to mention what you're talking about, what does that pause look like? It's not pausing in a state where you're still fatiguing. It's not pausing with the bar still on your back. It's actually like re-racking the bar, giving yourself that moment to recover, then unracking that bar, and then going into that next set. And again, it's something that you maybe could only do, you're talking about 8 reps at 75 to 80%, but now you can work on that ability to do 2 reps at 90% and then repeat and repeat versus, and it's more time efficient than doing,
grinding out
8, but on the other end, grinding out multiple sets of 2 and then resting for a full rest period. So you're getting more accrued volume at that higher intensity. And that's where, again, where it kind of really can marry for lots of individuals. The person who maybe doesn't do enough intensity can help you push intensity. For the person who doesn't do enough volume, it can help you push volume for that. So
yeah, certainly. So again, across the hypertrophy or strength building and then also into the power building, again, in a sense, what you're kind of doing here is like cheating the system.
For sure.
Right? You're it's not really a cheat, but it's, again, these strategic breaks between repetitions can give you just a little bit more juice to just get a little bit more. It's not like a nitrous system on your car, nitrous oxide or whatever. What it is it's like keeping it's hard to, well, we kind of explained it with the phosphocreatine. There's like a regen there. You get a little richer fuel, right? A little bit more, it's more specific. You get a little more fuel in the system to do the thing that you're trying to do. And the important thing to remember here is it allows you to apply more intensity, right, in the same amount of volume, which could mean you could get more volume and intensity at the same time, depending on how you've structured your workouts and where you implement cluster sets. This is not something you would want to do for everything that you're doing,
exactly,
right? It would be like you're picking your main movement, whatever your main movement is for the day, and that's where you're applying this. It could be applied multiple times. While I don't necessarily encourage that, it's kind of more of an advanced technique. Understand that, again, you're working this fitness to fatigue model. And if I'm applying more intensity right up front in my session, it's going to mean I'm going to likely have less neural drive, less gas in the fuel tank as I move further into my workout. So if we use like the bench press as an example, right? This is an easy one to kind of think about. And you mentioned something that I said I definitely wanted to come back to there, and that was, what do these pauses look like? And we'll talk about the timing of it, percentages of loads based on what it is that you're trying to achieve here in a second. But it's a rest. So if you're on the bench press and you're putting this pause in, when you pause, you are re-racking that weight. It is coming out of your hands. You need to let the body recover. Holding that load statically is not doing that. It might be, you could consider that like an active rest if you wanted. We're not doing that. We're actually unloading our body from it and allowing the system to start to regen. So it would be doing 2 reps, re-racking it, right, for a short period of time, which we'll talk about, then unracking it, doing 2 more reps, re-racking it, right? Same on the squat rack or anything else, and so on and so forth. So that's where I think people make the biggest mistake. Like, that's not what a cluster set is, right? That's more of like pause reps, right? In between, you could pause at the top or you could pause at the bottom, right? Depending on how it's applied in your program. But that's not what we're talking about here. You are actually unloading yourself, which also means you need to be very intentional about obviously managing the rest times and getting ready to reapproach that next 2 repetitions or whatever the protocol is for that particular workout, however you're doing this, right away. So it's enough time for you to kind of get your mindset back where it needs to be, get refocused, get your hands back on the bar, and get ready to unrack it to then perform your next 2 sets.
Yeah, and that's where when we talked about the general pop, this is the one thing that when doing a cluster set, it can start to feel almost like a little rush to unrack and re-rack and, and go through those mechanics. So it is something you do want to be very intentional with how you're doing it and make sure you don't get too caught up. Like when you're doing, for example, like in a squat, when you're having to rack it and then re-walk out and then rack it and then re-walk out, you still need to kind of take the right time and get your foot set, get your setup correctly and those different things. So that's where I guess like I don't want to say a warning, but something to think about when you are doing it, that you still want to be dialed in enough that you can execute it properly and safely.
Yeah. So if you're one of those people that takes 5 minutes to get underneath the bar in your squat, right? And
you stomp on the ground.
Stomp on the ground 3 times. You got to chalk up each time.
You need your buddy to slap your back real quick.
Yeah, you got to do the smelling salts and all that stuff before. Like, this is going to be a challenge for you because there's not time for any of that. Like, so you have to be efficient mechanically at getting into and out of position in order to be able to do this. So yeah, you can't waste any time here. So again, going back to mindset and what you said is feeling rushed. If you're one of those people that has this, like, it's like the batter stepping into the batter's box or the pitcher on the mound that goes through the 8 things that they go through.
Ritualness of
the ritual. This could be a challenge for you. That is a very good point.
For sure.